Good afternoon. This is a 2024 home studio redo of a talk originally given at the February 2016 Department of Energy Solid State Lighting Workshop in Raleigh, North Carolina. The talk was given in honor of Roland Haitz, who had passed away 6 months earlier in August 2015 at the age of 80. It's a great honor and pleasure to be able to say a few words about Roland. To me, Roland was a mentor, colleague, and friend. To our field of solid-state lighting, Roland was, of course, a visionary and pioneer. Here I've juxtaposed a handful of highlights from his career above the famous exponential cost per lumen and flux per lamp trends that have come to be known as Heitz's law. As I was listing these highlights, they almost seemed to me to have the feel of inevitability, that this unique guy always had just the right capabilities and history to make the contributions he made at a given point in time. That's a tautology, of course, since if he hadn't had the right capabilities, he couldn't have made those contributions. But humor me, and I think you'll see what I mean. Roland was born in Germany, but for graduate school moved to the US, where he was fortunate to work under the famous William Shockley. Roland has always, I think, had a predisposition for engineering, but from Shockley, he learned to think like a physicist about engineering, deeply and from first principles. From Shockley, interestingly, he also got an exposure to power electronics, which of course would benefit him later. After a brief stint at Texas Instruments, Roland joined HP and right away moved into optoelectronics, where he did pioneering work in optocouplers, as well as on the 7-segment LED displays that played a big role in the success of HP's handheld calculators. Arguably, these calculators were the earliest forerunners of today's smartphones, and the importance of displays to calculators is eerily similar to their importance to today's smartphones. At HP, Roland had a long and rich career. Under his watch, HP became an industry powerhouse in optoelectronics. He did this both at an intellectual and at a people level. At an intellectual level, for example, one especially important transition that he envisioned and drove was the one in the 1980s from LEDs to power LEDs, a transition that I suspect was sparked by his earlier exposure to power electronics, and a transition that ultimately paved the way for illumination class LEDs for solid-state lighting. At a people level, he was a master recruiter. I've argued, as have others, that the talent pool he helped build at HP led to HP becoming the Fairchild of solid-state lighting. An entire generation of engineers got their start at HP, then spread out into the solid-state lighting industry all over the world. And all of this seemed to come magically together in the late 1990s after Akasaki, Amano, and Nakamura's work on the blue LED, when Roland came to appreciate that power LEDs might be on the brink not just of another product line for HP, but of an entirely new industry. The rest is history. The 1995 creation of LumiLEDs and the 1999 white paper that helped launch massive worldwide R&D investment in solid-state lighting. After more than 30 years at HP, Roland did finally retire, though he continued to stay in close touch with the SSL community. Indeed, in 2011, he joined a startup company, QuarkStar, where he worked, among other things, on asymmetric light valves, a new way of thinking about very high extraction efficiency light engines. And in the very last month of his life, he was hard at work helping a few of us write an expert opinion for a special issue of Annalen der Physik that would contain the Akasaki, Amano, and Nakamura Blue LED Nobel Prize lectures. Roland was one of a kind, absolutely. in my mind, in two very different ways. The first way is the degree to which Roland was a consummate engineer, not just in the usual problem-solving sense, although he was a great problem solver. He was a consummate engineer because he was three kinds of engineer lumped into one. He was a historian's engineer, mindful of technological history, as was evident in the data that he painstakingly gathered and that ultimately led to Heitz's law. He was a physicist engineer. He knew when something was fundamental and when something wasn't. And there was nothing fundamental about the low efficiencies that at the time characterized blue LEDs. Indeed, he was keenly aware of two existence proofs for very high light emitter efficiency. One being the 45% efficient truncated pyramid red LED from HP, another being the 50% efficient infrared vertical cavity surface emitting lasers from Sandia, and used these existence proofs to shape his vision of the future of solid-state lighting. He was a businessman's engineer. He knew that most of the investment return to increasing lamp efficiency would not go to lamp manufacturers, because the cost of a lamp is much lower than the cost of electricity over the lifetime of a lamp. So R&D investment for high efficiency couldn't come just from industry. It had to be augmented by government. Hence the title of the white paper, The Case for a National Research Program on Semiconductor Lighting. The second way in which Roland was one of a kind in my mind was in his character as a human being. First and foremost, Roland was always after truth. He wasn't fussy about how it came. Data, deep analytical thinking, unimpeachably credible sources, any of these were fine. But his bar for truth was set very high. As those who interacted directly with him can attest, Roland was not shy to interrogate, to criticize, and to counter-argue until his very high bar was met. Conversations with Roland were rarely feel-good exercises. They were intended to reveal truth. Second, Roland was courageous. Sometimes the truth leads you to conclusions that are difficult to believe on the face of it, and then it takes courage to follow those truths. Sometimes people call that kind of follow-through vision, and certainly the outcome can be visionary. But more than anything else, I think it represents courage. Roland had critics. It was easy for some to view his call for a national research program as simply a ploy to get government funding for a research area of parochial self-interest to HP or Lumileds. But Roland's call was by no means parochial self-interest. He would not have tolerated that for a nanosecond. His call was motivated solely by the truth of the national and global energy savings benefits that could be unleashed. Third, Roland placed enormous value on work. Even after he retired from HP, and even as he struggled with the cancer that he ultimately passed away from, his capacity for work was enormous. During the 4 months before he passed away, he spent much effort, despite severe pain, co-authoring the Annalen der Physik paper I mentioned earlier. Many times during those 4 months, I thought to relieve him of some of the work, but each time he dug in. And his contribution, which was to place SSL in the context of the vast backdrop of semiconductor science and technology that he had lived and breathed, was, in my opinion, essential to the paper. For many, work is the means someday to not work. For Roland, work was the means to give life purpose. Let me close by mentioning what we all know. No human being works in a vacuum. At times in our lives, we are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like the young Roland here on the left. At times in our lives, we are serious and thoughtful, like the older Roland here on the right. But we cannot have the kind of enduring and productive career that Roland had without emotional support. And this was provided in spades by his wife, Benti. So let me close by paying tribute to both of them. Roland for the visionary role he played in solid state lighting, and Benty, who enabled him to play that role.